The conference room smelled of fresh coffee and ambition, the kind of place where deals were sealed with handshakes and smiles. I stood at the head of the table, my presentation slides glowing on the screen behind me, outlining the $10 million contract I just secured for Pinnacle Solutions. The client, a major tech firm, had signed that morning, their CEO praising my strategy as game-changing. My team clapped, their faces bright with pride. Then Diana Kessler, my boss, leaned forward in her leather chair, her smile sharp as a blade. "Well done, Hannah," she said, her voice smooth. "But we're restructuring. Your position is no longer needed. Effective immediately." The room went still. My name is Hannah, and at 38, I'd just been fired in front of my team, moments after the biggest win of my career. Diana thought she'd buried me. She had no idea I'd make her feel every ounce of the fallout. Before that moment, my life had been a steady climb, built on grit, determination, and countless late nights. I'd grown up in a small town outside Denver, where the Rockies loomed like silent guardians over our modest community. My parents ran Bennett's Hardware, a cramped store filled with the scent of sawdust and motor oil. They worked sunrise to sunset, their hands calloused from stocking shelves and fixing tools, teaching me that success came from showing up, day after day, no matter the odds. I was their only child, a quiet girl with big dreams, who spent evenings helping balance the store's books or dreaming of a world beyond the town's borders. Those early lessons shaped me, fueling my drive to escape the constraints of small-town life and carve out a place in the city's bustling heart. I earned a scholarship to the University of Colorado, studying business with a hunger that surprised even my professors. After graduation, I landed a junior analyst role at Pinnacle Solutions, a Denver-based consulting firm specializing in tech partnerships, and I never looked back. Pinnacle was my proving ground, a place where ideas sparked and deals transformed fortunes. I loved the rhythm of the office, the hum of laptops, the clatter of keyboards, the electric buzz of a pitch coming together. My days began with a ritual, a double espresso from Brewed Awakening, the cafe downstairs, where I'd exchange smiles with the barista, Lena, who always remembered my order. I'd settle at my desk, scanning industry news on my tablet, then dive into client files, my mind racing with strategies to win their trust. My loft apartment was my sanctuary, a sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Denver's skyline. I'd furnished it with care, mid-century chairs, a wall of books, a turntable spinning jazz records that filled the air with Miles Davis's soulful notes. Evenings were for unwinding with a glass of Pinot Noir, the city's lights twinkling below, or hosting dinners for friends, where laughter and stories flowed as freely as the wine. My life felt full, purposeful, a testament to the years I'd spent climbing. At Pinnacle, I'd risen from junior analyst to senior strategist over 12 years, each promotion hard-won through sacrifices that piled up like receipts. I'd missed family reunions, canceled vacations, and watched relationships fade as I prioritized deadlines over dates. My team, 5 brilliant consultants I'd mentored, became my family, their trust earned through late-night brainstorming sessions and shared victories over tough clients. Jenna, my deputy, was a data wizard with a dry wit. Carlos, a negotiation expert, could charm anyone, and the others brought their own strengths, making us a powerhouse. I'd poured my heart into their growth, celebrating their successes as if they were my own. Diana Kessler, our VP of Operations, had hired me all those years ago, and I'd admired her fiercely. Her polished suits, her commanding presence in boardrooms, her ability to steer Pinnacle through market shifts, they'd inspired me to emulate her. I worked tirelessly to earn her approval, believing loyalty and results would secure my place. I'd stay late to refine pitches, volunteer for high-risk projects, even mentor new hires on my own time, all to prove I belonged. But as the years passed, I began to sense a shift, a cooling in Diana's regard that I couldn't quite pinpoint. Loyalty, I'd soon learn, was a currency she didn't value. The signs of betrayal crept in slowly, like shadows lengthening at dusk, easy to dismiss until they darkened everything. Over the past year, Diana's praise, once frequent, dwindled to clipped emails and half-hearted nods in meetings. "Solid work, Hannah, but let's keep it simple," she'd say, even when my strategies drove record profits. I noticed her favoring newer hires, especially Mark Reynolds, a consultant in his late 20s with a flashy smile and a knack for self-promotion. Mark's pitches were style over substance, but Diana laughed at his jokes, assigned him plum clients, and praised his fresh perspective in front of the team. Meanwhile, my budgets were cut, my proposals dissected with a scrutiny that felt personal. During a quarterly review, she critiqued my latest project, a client retention strategy that had boosted revenue by 15%, saying, "It's competent, but lacks vision." The word competent landed like a slap, diminishing months of work. I swallowed my frustration, nodding politely, but the sting lingered. There were other signs, subtler but no less telling. I'd arrive at the office to find meetings scheduled without me, their agendas vague when I asked. Once, I walked into the break room to see Diana and Mark huddled over coffee, their conversation halting as I approached. "Just catching up," Diana said, her smile tight. I nodded, but the air felt charged, like I'd interrupted something meant to stay hidden. Emails started bypassing me, my name mysteriously absent from threads about projects I'd led. My team noticed, their loyalty unwavering but their unease growing. Over lunch one day, Jenna leaned across the table, her voice low. "Something's off with Diana. She's icing you out, Hannah. Be careful." I shrugged, not wanting to admit how much it bothered me. "She's just busy," I said, but the words felt hollow. Then there was the client dinner I wasn't invited to, despite leading the account. Mark attended instead, and the next day, Diana praised his client rapport in a team meeting. My stomach knotted, a warning I could no longer ignore. The memo was the final straw, a revelation that turned suspicion into certainty. 2 weeks before the $10 million deal closed, I stayed late, perfecting the Horizon Tech pitch. The office was quiet, the only sound the hum of the air conditioning and the faint glow of my monitor. I opened the shared drive to upload my slides and saw a file labeled Internal Review. Curiosity tugged at me, and I clicked. It was a draft from Diana to the board, outlining a streamlining plan to optimize operational efficiency. My name appeared under redundancies, with a chilling note: Bennett's contributions are replicable, recommend termination to optimize budget. My breath caught, the words searing into me. I'd led the biggest deal in Pinnacle's history, and she was planning to fire me to save money. I scrolled further, finding emails between Diana and Mark, discussing his promotion to my role post-restructuring. "He's got the charisma we need," Diana wrote. "Hannah's too focused on details." Charisma. Not the deals I'd closed, not the team I'd built, just charisma. I sat back, my heart pounding, the betrayals sinking in. I opened my desk drawer, pulled out a USB drive, and saved the files, my hands trembling but my mind clear. Diana thought she could erase me, but I was already gathering the pieces to fight back. In the conference room that day, as Diana's words cut through the air, the world seemed to shrink, the edges blurring until only her face remained, smug and unyielding. My team's shock mirrored my own, Jenna's wide eyes, Carlos's clenched jaw, the others frozen in disbelief. The $10 million contract, the months of negotiations, the sleepless nights crafting the perfect pitch, all dismissed in a single, calculated sentence. Anger surged, a wildfire in my chest, but I forced it down, my voice steady as I met her gaze. "I understand," I said, the words tasting like ash. "I'll clear out my desk." Diana blinked, clearly expecting a scene, tears, or a plea. "Good," she said, leaning back in her chair, her smile a razor's edge. "HR will handle the paperwork." I gave my team a small nod, a silent promise that this wasn't over, and walked out, my heels clicking on the polished floor, each step a defiance of her smugness. She thought she'd broken me, that I'd fade quietly into obscurity. But I'd spent years building strategies to win battles, and this was one I'd fight with everything I had. The drive home was a blur, the Denver skyline fading into the dusk, the city's lights smudging against my vision. I gripped the steering wheel, Diana's words looping in my mind, each one a fresh wound. The memo, the emails, her casual dismissal, they weren't just professional slights, they were a betrayal of the trust I'd given her, the years I'd poured into Pinnacle. I pulled into my parking garage and sat there, the engine's soft ticks filling the silence. Grief washed over me, heavy and cold, not just for the job but for the belief I'd held in fairness, in loyalty rewarded. I thought of my parents, their weathered hands stacking tools, their pride when I'd landed my first promotion. What would they think now? I let the tears come, hot and silent, allowing myself to feel the weight of it all, the loss, the injustice, the raw sting of being discarded. But as the tears dried, a spark of clarity emerged, sharp and unyielding. Diana had made a mistake, not in firing me, but in underestimating me. I opened my laptop, the USB drive's faint glow a beacon in the dim light. The evidence was there, her plan, her words, her betrayal. I wouldn't just survive this. I'd make sure she faced the consequences of crossing me. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, a glass of Pinot untouched, my mind racing through possibilities. I thought of every project I'd led, every client I'd won, every late night spent perfecting a pitch. Pinnacle wasn't just a job, it was a part of me, woven into my identity. Losing it felt like losing a limb, but I wasn't powerless. I remembered my first big win at Pinnacle, a $2 million contract I'd secured against all odds, the champagne toast with my team, Diana's rare smile of approval. Those moments had defined me, and Diana couldn't take them away. I called Jenna, my voice steady despite the hour. "I need to know you're with me," I said. "Diana's playing dirty, but I'm not done." Jenna didn't hesitate. "We're with you, Hannah. The whole team. She's making a huge mistake." Her loyalty grounded me, a reminder that I wasn't alone. I hung up, opened my laptop, and started planning. Diana thought she'd written my ending, but I was about to rewrite hers. By morning, I was a woman transformed, fueled by purpose and a quiet rage. I started with the client, Horizon Tech, the $10 million deal I'd spent a year cultivating. Rachel Chen, their CEO, had trusted me from our first meeting, her sharp mind matching my own. I called her, my tone professional despite the knot in my stomach. "Rachel, it's Hannah. I've been let go from Pinnacle, effective yesterday." Her silence was heavy, then a sharp, "What? You were the heart of this deal. Why would they do that?" I kept it factual, avoiding bitterness. "Restructuring. But I'm committed to this project's success. Can we meet tomorrow?" She agreed, scheduling coffee at a downtown cafe. I hung up, a spark of hope igniting. Next, I contacted Emily Tran, my lawyer and college friend, whose no-nonsense approach I trusted. I emailed her the memo and emails, detailing Diana's plan to fire me and promote Mark. "This is wrongful termination," Emily said over the phone, her voice brimming with confidence. "The timing, right after a $10 million deal, is damning. We can sue for damages, but what's your goal, Hannah?" I didn't hesitate. "I want Diana to face consequences, professionally, publicly. And I want my career back, on my own terms." Emily's smile was audible. "Let's make it happen." I spent the day preparing, my loft a command center of strategy. I reviewed the Horizon contract, recalling every clause I'd negotiated. One stood out: if the lead strategist, me, was removed, Horizon could terminate without penalty. Diana didn't know I'd insisted on that clause, a precaution born of instinct. It was my ace, and I'd play it carefully. I drafted a pitch for Rachel, outlining how I'd deliver the project independently, my fingers flying over the keyboard as jazz played softly in the background. I thought of my team, their faces in the conference room, their trust in me unshaken. I texted Jenna, asking for a discreet meeting with the group. "We need to talk options," I wrote. Her reply was instant, "Name the place." I chose a quiet bar near the office, a place we'd celebrated past wins. That evening, over craft beers and dim lighting, I laid out my plan. "I'm starting my own firm," I said. "If you're in, we take Horizon with us." Carlos raised his glass. "We're in, Hannah. Diana's about to learn what a real team looks like." Their faith bolstered me, a shield against the risks ahead. The turning point came at the coffee meeting with Rachel. We sat in a bustling cafe, the clink of mugs and murmur of conversations a backdrop to our talk. Rachel's dark hair was pulled into a sleek bun, her eyes assessing as I presented my vision. "Pinnacle's team is strong," I said, "but I designed the strategy. I know Horizon's goals: growth, innovation, trust. I can deliver that independently through my new firm, Bennett Strategies." I handed her a printed outline, detailing timelines, deliverables, and my team's expertise. Rachel sipped her latte, her gaze steady. "I signed with Pinnacle because of you, Hannah. Your firing raises red flags." "What's the catch?" I took a breath, choosing honesty. "No catch. Pinnacle's contract allows termination if I'm removed. You can walk away, no penalty. I'm asking you to walk with me instead." She leaned back, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Bold move. Send me a formal proposal by Monday. If it's as good as this, we're yours." The twist was in the contract clause, a detail Diana had overlooked. She thought she'd secured the deal, but I held the key to its future, and I was ready to turn it. Over the weekend, I worked with a relentlessness I hadn't felt since my early days at Pinnacle. My loft was a flurry of papers, laptops, and coffee mugs, the city's skyline a silent witness to my determination. I drafted the proposal for Horizon, pouring every ounce of expertise into its pages: market analysis, risk assessments, a vision for innovation that had won Rachel's trust in the first place. I coordinated with my team, meeting at Jenna's apartment to refine our approach. "We're betting on you," Carlos said, his usual charm tempered by seriousness. "Don't let Diana's shadow mess with your head." I nodded, grateful for their candor. I also reached out to 3 other Pinnacle clients I'd managed, worth $15 million combined. Over discreet phone calls, I hinted at Pinnacle's instability without me, planting seeds of doubt. "I'm exploring new ventures," I told one client lead, a CFO named Priya. "I'd love to discuss how we can continue our work." Her response was cautious but intrigued: "Let's talk next week." I knew I was walking a tightrope, professional ethics versus survival, but Diana had drawn first blood, and I wasn't backing down. Emily's role was crucial. She drafted a demand letter, accusing Diana of wrongful termination and seeking $250,000 in damages for lost earnings and emotional distress. "We're not bluffing," she said, reviewing the letter with me. "The memo and emails are damning. She'll either settle or face a lawsuit that'll tank her reputation." I had the letter sent to Diana's office, timed for Monday morning, when she'd be riding high on the deal's success. I imagined her opening it, her polished exterior cracking as she read the accusations. To add pressure, I asked my team to draft their resignations, citing lack of leadership trust as their reason. "We're not just leaving," Jenna said, her eyes fierce. "We're making a statement." I nodded, the weight of their loyalty grounding me. By Sunday night, I had the proposal ready, the team aligned, and the client calls in motion. I sat in my loft, the jazz record spinning, and felt a quiet certainty. Diana's world was about to shift, and I was the one moving the pieces. Monday morning unleashed the fallout, a storm I'd orchestrated with precision. Rachel called Pinnacle to invoke the termination clause, citing my departure as a breach of trust. By noon, Horizon had formally withdrawn, and I'd emailed my proposal to Rachel, outlining Bennett Strategies' plan to take the project forward. Diana's response was a frantic email, her usual polish fraying at the edges. "Hannah, we need to discuss this. There's been a misunderstanding. Please call me." I let it sit unanswered, savoring her panic. My team's resignations hit her desk that afternoon, 5 letters in a row, each a blow to her leadership. Jenna texted me from the office, "She's unraveling. Mark's botching the Horizon follow-up, and the board's demanding answers." I could picture Diana in her corner office, her manicured nails tapping nervously, her confidence eroding as the consequences piled up. The client calls I'd made bore fruit. One account, Priya's, scheduled a meeting to reevaluate their contract, while another sent Pinnacle a formal inquiry about my departure. The demand letter was the final strike, its 48-hour deadline looming like a guillotine. Diana called me that evening, her voice a tight coil of desperation. "Hannah, this is unnecessary. Come back, and we'll work it out. You're making a mistake." I let her words hang, then replied, my tone cold as steel. "You made the mistake, Diana. You chose Mark's charisma over my results. Now live with the consequences." I hung up, my heart racing but my conviction unshaken. The aftermath was a tempest, a mix of triumph and turmoil that tested every ounce of my resilience. Horizon signed with Bennett Strategies, a $10 million contract that launched my firm with a bang. Rachel's trust in me was unwavering, her handshake firm as we sealed the deal in her sleek office. My team joined me, their expertise ensuring a smooth transition, but the logistics were grueling: leasing an office, securing funding, navigating legal paperwork. I poured my savings into the startup, a gamble that kept me awake at night, staring at spreadsheets in my loft, the city's hum a reminder of the stakes. The other Pinnacle clients followed, bringing $12 million in new business, their confidence in me a validation of everything I'd fought for. Priya's firm signed on after a marathon negotiation, her CFO praising my unmatched insight. But there were setbacks: a delayed vendor contract, a team member's brief hesitation about leaving Pinnacle's stability, the constant pressure of proving myself in a cutthroat industry. I leaned on Emily, who became more than a lawyer, joining me for late-night coffees to strategize. My parents called from their small town, their voices thick with pride. "You're tougher than we ever were," my dad said, and I held on to that through the hardest days. Diana's world, meanwhile, was collapsing under the weight of her miscalculation. The board, furious about Horizon's withdrawal, grilled her in emergency meetings, their trust in her leadership eroding with each lost client. Mark's incompetence became a liability. His first solo pitch to a major account was described as embarrassing in an industry blog, and clients began citing quality concerns in public reviews. Pinnacle's stock dipped 8% in a week, triggering investor panic. Diana tried to salvage her image, hosting a press conference to announce new strategic initiatives, but the room was half empty, her usual charisma falling flat. Emily's demand letter forced a settlement, $200,000 and a formal apology from Pinnacle, which I donated to a women's entrepreneurship fund in a quiet act of defiance. The real blow was Diana's reputation. Industry whispers turned into headlines, with one article calling her the architect of Pinnacle's decline. 6 months later, she was transitioned to a lesser role at a smaller firm, her once shiny career a shadow of its former self. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Her downfall was her own doing, and I'd simply lit the match. The challenges of running Bennett Strategies were relentless, but they forged me into someone stronger. There were days when cash flow was tight, when a client pushed back on a deadline, when I doubted my ability to lead. I'd sit in my new office, a modest space with exposed brick and a view of the Rockies, and feel the weight of it all. But my team was my anchor: Jenna's sharp analysis, Carlos's charm, the others' unwavering commitment. We celebrated small wins: a signed contract, a successful pitch, with takeout and laughter, rebuilding the camaraderie we'd lost at Pinnacle. My parents visited, their eyes wide at my office, my mother hugging me tightly. "You've built something real," she said, and I felt the truth of it. I traded my loft for a house in the suburbs, a cozy place with a garden where I planted lavender and hosted team barbecues. The scent of blooming flowers, the sound of my team's laughter, it was a new kind of home, one I'd earned. A year later, I stood in my office, now a vibrant hub in Denver's tech district, watching my team pitch to a new client worth $5 million. Bennett Strategies had grown to 12 employees, with contracts totaling $25 million, our name synonymous with innovation and trust. We'd launched a mentorship program for young women in tech, a nod to the fund I'd supported, and I spoke at industry events, my story resonating with aspiring leaders. Diana was a distant memory, her name rarely mentioned, her career relegated to a cautionary tale. I'd heard she'd taken a mid-level role at a struggling firm, her once commanding presence dimmed by her own choices. At a conference in San Francisco, a young consultant approached me, her notebook clutched tightly. "Your story changed how I see my career," she said, her voice earnest. "How do you keep going after someone tries to break you?" I thought of the conference room, Diana's sharp smile, the memo that had shattered my trust. I saw my parents' store, my team's loyalty, the Rockies glowing under a sunset. "You don't let their choices define you," I told her, my voice steady. "You write your own victory, and you make it bigger than their betrayal." Driving home that night, my new house waiting with its lavender garden, I felt a quiet pride. Diana thought she could erase me, but I'd built an empire from her ashes. What do you do when someone tries to break you? You rise, and you make sure they feel the weight of their mistake.